Hi, it's been a long while since I've actually made a new video, and I want to try and keep this a bit brief as I don't know if I'm going to be coming back long term to doing this sort of thing, although it would be nice to try and do it again. However, I wanted to try and bring up a few updates as well as talk about why I'm not making videos at the moment, as well as talk about the new book that I just released as of this recording today, and talk about what I have going on, at least planned for the future. So let's start off with the first topic, why I've been away. So it's a combination of different issues. First of all, I switched to a different computer. From going from Mac to PC meant that I had to switch out all the software that I was using and largely have to relearn a bunch of different software to be able to actually do any sort of recording or editing. And even still, I'm not sure how this is going to come out. This is probably going to be very lazily edited just because I'm not sure of how to do a lot of this again since I'm using completely different software. But I'm going to try my best to do something with it at least. The other issue, of course, was just the lack of motivation for doing YouTube. I had expressed it in the past before, and it just continued to show more and more in the work that I was putting out that I was slowing down and just not really having a good time with the prospect of making videos. It just became more and more difficult for me to try and put out something that I was proud of, and I continuously felt like I was falling backwards while trying to do something new. I kept putting more and more effort into something that I would get burned out so quickly on, and found myself falling backwards with it. The other thing I wanted to update regarding the channel itself is that there's been a big removal of some of my most popular videos, that being the Dark Disorder series, and I've removed almost all of them simply because, to me at least, the series itself doesn't really serve much of a purpose on YouTube, at least from my perspective. If you wanted to hear about disorders or hear about other sorts of connotations and concepts regarding mental health, channels like Katie Morton, channels like Dr. Tracy Marks, and many other YouTubers who are far more qualified than me would be able to handle this topic far better and in a far more effective and shorter manner than I used to. Sure enough, some people may have found it entertaining or insightful, but I don't think that keeping them up even for views is worth it. Even if you were to try and make the argument that they're up there, it's something I should be proud of for putting so much effort into, and that the views should be something that I at least try and hold on to. None of that really matters to me. I don't care about the views. I don't really care about the people who do, not that I don't care about people who support it. I don't necessarily care about the encouragement. I don't really care about people trying to encourage this sort of lazy content, because to me it feels lazy. And to me it felt like something that I wanted to try and dispose of rather than keep over time, and that feeling just kept growing more and more and more. And so yes, even my most popular video, the video on maladaptive daydreaming disorder, which I still think to this day is extremely lackluster and extremely lazy, came down, and they're going to stay down because I do not want to be putting out content like that is very lazy and doesn't have the heart in it that it should. So with that said, I wanted to try and move on from the topic of the channel itself, but I do need to make one more comment on why I haven't been making videos, and kind of part of that has to do with just the room I'm in, actually. See, I live at home with my family currently still, while I am attending grad school simply for expense reasons. But the issues at hand are that the room itself had to be renovated, and the flooring is no longer carpet, and there is no longer foam along the walls to keep sound down, so I have a large room echo. I'm actually recording underneath a large quilt to try and keep the room echo down, even though I probably won't be very successful as if the rest of the room were treated in an effective manner. However, I do think that recording itself and having fun with videos is something that I would want to do eventually again, but if I'm going to do it, I don't want to try and overproduce videos like I used to. If I'm going to do videos again, I want to try and make them feel more genuine and put the quality into them that is worthy of it, regardless of how much time and editing goes into it. Personally, I don't think the amount of time and editing I'd put into some of the previous videos that lacked information and were just lazily done, like the end of the Mind Control and Pursuit of Power series or the Dark Disorders episodes. I don't think that I want to try and do that again if I do come back to YouTube in any sort of long-term capacity. Instead, I would rather want to do videos based around interesting topics that I want to talk about. I always find myself talking about interesting things, and I would rather focus on that instead of just trying to appease people by focusing around specific content. I'd rather make it somewhat educational, show my interest in it personally, and maybe spread some interest towards that topic for other people. Maybe do a bit of edutainment, as well as, of course, do the typical horror when it suits me. Speaking of horror, I want to move on to the topic of the book that I just released today, known as the Corrupted Opus. It serves as a closing chapter for the era known as Rainer Lewington, or at least the pen name that I used to go by, known as Rainer Lewington, as a lot of the works in that book are actually from well before I stopped using that name, and are from a time where I felt like it was going to be no end in sight of me doing short stories and poems. Well, that day kind of arrived, today at least, with the Corrupted Opus serving as the chapter closing up that era of my writing, and a new point from which I want to try and embark on new and larger projects, which I'll get to in a moment. But at least for the book, I wanted to comment on it and say that the book itself is something that I'm actually quite a bit proud of. It's far better edited and put together than the original 2 books that I put under the Rainer Lewington name. And yes, while I didn't put this under Dark Pages from Dark Pages Volume 2, I am much happier having it be a standalone book that I can put my real name on and have something out there that has my real name attached to it. So, with that said, there are several stories in there. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but 2 of them are exclusive to the book that you will not find on the Dark Pages from Darker Ages website. My apologies. And one of them is exclusive purely to the book. One of them you can find on YouTube if you look for the story name. It's called A Send-Off by a Toxin, or I believe Send Off by Toxin. See, I'm not going to be editing this much simply because I want to do this all in one take. I may remove a few noises here and there, but I want to try and keep this brief. And, of course, the fully exclusive story that is towards the end, if not at the end, of the short story collection part of the book is known as The Night That Cast a Shadow Upon the Sun. It is a Brothers Grimm style fairy tale story that has a lot of fun, gore, and horror attached to it. And I think it's something that people will kind of enjoy to be able to read aloud as a twisted little fairy tale. There's also a poetry section that is attached to it and contains some of the better poems and stories included in the book as well. And the reason I say better is because they're better in my opinion. There were quite a few stories that I've either set aside for other collections that have not gone through since, but I'm still under contract for, or other stories that I just felt weren't a good fit for the book. Either they were too personal and felt like they were something that was meant to kind of just stay on the website and not be made money off, not have money made off of them, or the stories that they were inspired by. It feels like if I were to try and make money off of those stories directly, that it would just feel like a form of exploitation that I wouldn't want to be attached to. Those stories are inspired by real events involving real people and real tragedies, and in many respects, at least with these stories, since 2 of them, at least the ones that are written, which I'm not sure if I'll actually keep up, they involve children, and I don't know if I actually want to keep them up on the website. There's been plenty of stories and poems that I've removed from the website over the years simply because my tastes have changed, what I found appropriate has changed, and what I actually want to have attached to my name has changed. So to me, I feel like it's worthwhile to try and uphold myself to some form of standard that I find to be the most effective and find to be the most reflective of who I am. And lastly, I want to move on to the last topic of talking about where I'm going, what's next. So kind of what's next for me, at least in terms of what I plan on doing overall in the future, is I definitely want to keep writing books. but I'm also working on a master's degree in counseling, at least at the moment of this recording. I do want to try and finish up my degree and have a certification that I can fall back on, just in case books never truly do take off for me, and I can be able to have something to be able to work with and work by and still be able to help people. And I've joked with it enough with my family and friends and talked about what would happen if for some reason the books do start to sell well, which I sometimes doubt myself if they actually will. I honestly still want to try and have an outlet by which to help people. And I don't always feel that books, while they can be helpful to certain people in certain instances and serve as an escape, I still want to be able to have a direct one-on-one way of helping others that I can be able to see and directly interact with. Hence why I still want to stick with my career path as a counselor, even if the books do start doing very, very well. Which, if they do start doing very, very well, I obviously have all of you to thank for that. And no matter what happens with these books, I'm eternally grateful for the support that you've given to the past books, past stories, these past videos in the channel, or to the new books that are coming. And of course, to wrap this up a bit, I do have a few new books coming here pretty soon. 2 that I know for certain are going to end up coming out, at least in some capacity, are Press Play, which is going to be a mystery thriller and psychological horror novel involving several characters who end up moving off to the West Coast near Oregon and Washington and end up having to solve a mystery after stealing some VHS tapes from an old VHS tape store and trying to set spirits to rest so that the supernatural things that keep happening in their town can finally be put to rest, so to speak. It is a little bit inspired from older books from authors like Enid Blyton, Edgar Allan Poe, and even from modern mediums like the Disney television show Gravity Falls, which I found to be one of my favorites growing up. It does draw inspiration from all of those things, but has concepts and storyline aspects that are completely its own. I'm very excited to finish writing that, which at this point I have all of the foundations ready and just need to actually, put pen to paper and finish the manuscript. But once it's done, I'll be more than happy to showcase that book and the Volvox Chronicles, which has been a collection of stories that started out with Dark Pages from Darker Ages Volume 1. I intend on retconning some of the irrelevant information and finalizing the full story surrounding the character Vanessa Rose from The Lies I Tell Myself, which was one of the stories in that book. There's a lot of connecting stories related to the events in the Volvox Chronicles, and I actually want to turn it into its own novel. So that will be my next project, I think, after Press Play, as I want to try and really bring a close to Vanessa Rose's story, at least as it stands, and connect it to the larger universe that her and many of the other characters that will appear in the book are actually a part of, which I have yet to fully reveal and hopefully will be able to reveal soon enough. With that said, thank you so much for listening to the end of this video. I know it's a little bit long, especially for the current standards of YouTube, but hey, I kind of wanted to just put something out there that would be able to appease everyone and would kind of give an update on where things are with me personally. The aspects that I think I missed while going through this brief talk about this was just, my own mental health kind of waning here and there with my own condition that I deal with. With all of that said, though, I do really appreciate everything that everyone here has supported with the channel and with everything else that I have going on with writing and whatnot. If you want to keep up with me, follow me over on Twitter at Timothy L. Duran, all caps on the initials with TLD, and the rest of it lowercase. And of course, I'm never on Facebook or Instagram, but I do occasionally check in on there, so if you feel the need to try and contact me in any reasonable way with those platforms, eventually I'll get to you there as well. With all of that said, thank you so much for listening and watching, and for some reason continuing to check in on this channel. And as always, come hell or high water, please stay safe.